Navarro. Thank you, Erin. I also want to just thank the Cross Cultural Centers for organizing this event today and actually staging this dialogue. It's really crucial that we come together to publicly discuss the fraternity and sorority incident from last weekend. So I'm really happy to be here to do that with all of you today, and so thank you for the invitation. Again, for those of you who might not know me, my name is Dr. Janelle Navarro. I teach for ethnic studies. I also teach for women's and gender studies, and I'm currently the president of the newly found American Indian and Indigenous Faculty Staff Association. Many on our campus have specifically stated that they do not understand why others, including President Armstrong and Student Affairs, have said that this party is, quote unquote, offensive to Native Americans. I hope to offer some clarity to that point today. I'll begin here by saying, while I am an Indigenous faculty member here at Cal Poly, I do not speak for all Native peoples, and because I come from the Western Band of Cherokee and not from the Navajo Nation, or the term in which the Navajos refer to themselves, Diné Nation, I cannot speak specifically for Navajos. However, a statement has been released just this morning in Indian Country Today, which is the largest newspaper outlet that circulates across Native America. The statement released is from Dr. Jennifer Rose Dennett-Dale, a citizen of the Navajo Nation and a member of the Navajo Nation Human Rights Commission. I'll read an excerpt from Dennett-Dale that has been issued on behalf of the Navajo people. Quote, "The theme Colonial Bros and Navajos for a frat sorority party by students at Cal Poly directly references Navajos, whose name for themselves is Diné, and parodies U.S. Navajo colonial relations. In 1863, the Indian fighter Kit Carson received orders from James H. Carleton, governor and commander of New Mexico Territory, to destroy the Navajo people. Kit Carson's scorch and burn campaign against the Navajo people literally left the Navajo homeland burning as thousands of Navajo refugees who were reduced to starvation and poverty were herded into American forts and then forced to march to the Bosque Redondo Reservation at Fort Sumner, New Mexico. For 4 years, over 8,000 Navajo prisoners of the United States lived under genocidal conditions. Many did not survive. In addition to constantly being on guard for slave raiders who stole the women and children, the Navajo women and girls were subjected to sexual assaults and rape by both the American soldiers and the slave raiders. Therefore, to invoke colonial bros is to refer to one of the most darkest moments in American history and certainly for the Navajo people. It is a reference to one of the most brutal, humiliating, and devastating experiences under American colonialism. To refer to the scantily clad women who came as Navajos is not only to diminish the Navajo people as a whole, because the term connotates whore and prostitute and suggests that Navajo women were sexually available to the white soldiers, it also says that it is not possible to rape or sexually assault Navajo women because they are inherently rapeable. Thus, colonial bros and Navajos is a slander on Navajo women who have survived rape and sexual assault that was part of that conquest." End of quote. I read these words by Dennett-Dale because the American Indian and Indigenous Faculty Staff Association is concerned that a party like this might create an unsafe environment for the Native students on our campus. The term we use in ethnic studies to talk about events like this is cultural appropriation. As an association, we would be equally concerned if students impersonated African Americans or Latinos through blackface or brownface, for example. All of these examples perpetuate stereotypes about people of color, and they diminish the realities of violence and abuse that colonialism enacted against all people of color in the United States. Namely, I say this to suggest that as an association, we care deeply about establishing a campus climate that is inclusive and safe for everyone here at Cal Poly. And it's our hope that you do as well. Moreover, as we speak, we have recruiters from our own admissions office here at Cal Poly hard at work in Indian country and on reservations trying to recruit Native students to our campus. And an event like this one last weekend stands to minimize the success of those recruitment efforts, and that would be an incredibly disheartening result. At this time, I'd actually like any member of the American Indian and Indigenous Faculty Staff Association who's here to stand. So again, this is a really newly found faculty staff association that we've just started this year, actually. And the reason I ask you to stand is because these are the faces then of our leadership that can actually help us deal with a serious incident like this. Okay, you guys can sit down. Thank you. Finally, as President Armstrong noted in his campus-wide email, we too, as an association, believe this party is not the Mustang Way. Instead, the Mustang Way promotes compassion, inclusivity, and educational excellence. It is my hope that an event like this might prompt us to learn of a deeper history of Native peoples that perhaps we currently don't have, and position ourselves to being a more diverse campus so that when all of you graduate from Cal Poly, you can enter the world with a greater sense of cultural awareness and cultural fluency. Thank you.
Thank you, Janelle. Now I'd like to invite Dr. Jane Lair up to the podium.
Sorry, I'm very short. Can this be lower? Oh. Thank you. Hi, my name is Jane Lear. I'm an associate professor in the Ethnic Studies and Women's and Gender Studies departments here at Cal Poly. I'm also the incoming chair of the Women's and Gender Studies departments. And on behalf of both Ethnic Studies and Women's and Gender Studies, I want to thank Dr. Janelle Navarro for her comments. And then I also want to thank Erin Eccles and the Cross Cultural Centers and other organizations on campus for making this forum happen. And I want to thank all of you who are here to participate in the dialogue and to build an inclusive, equitable, and truly caring community here at Cal Poly. I wanted to start by just talking about some of the discussions that I've been having with my students about what happened last weekend. Some of my students started off those discussions by asking, is what happened actually more racist or more sexist? And other students responded by saying, why are we asking that question? Shouldn't we be focused on intersectionality? Shouldn't we be talking about the cumulative impacts of racism and sexism on this campus? Other students of mine have pointed out that there are in fact many themed parties here at Cal Poly, many of which are offensive from an ethnic studies and women's and gender studies perspective and hurtful to individuals on this campus and to our community. They described seeing many people in blackface for Halloween in 2013. They told me about themed parties such as CEOs and office hoes, as well as schoolgirls and teachers, in which all the teachers are male and all the schoolgirls, well, you can imagine what they're dressed like. They also raise questions because they see women and or people of color participating in these events and they want to know what that means. Is it about internalized oppression, which is something that we talk about often in ethnic studies and women's and gender studies? Is it about parity or performance? How can we understand this? A lot of my students are really interested in the question about what happens next for the individuals involved in the events this weekend, but also all of the individuals, for example, who wore blackface this Halloween. Should our goal as a community be education, or should it be bringing down the hammer, which was a phrase that came up in my class quite often yesterday? The question is really one about how should the students be accountable, but also how should we be accountable as a community? A big discussion has been one that I saw happening here in the text about intentionality versus unintentionality. And many students in my classes believe that the students this weekend didn't intend to be racist and or sexist. But one of the things that we've been studying in my class, which is Gender, Race, Science, and Technology, is looking at the question of why women and or people of color remain underrepresented within science and engineering fields. And we've been talking about microaggressions and cumulative disadvantages. We've been talking not just about individual discrimination, but organizational and institutional discrimination and structural discrimination. We've been thinking about how patterns in STEM disciplines related to recruitment, retention, and graduation are related to what happens in the everyday lives of students on college campuses like ours. And these questions that we've been raising about science and engineering are questions for Cal Poly as a whole. How do experience